get going.
Yep.
All right. Terry, did you want to start, or do you want me to just jump in?
Just jump in, go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Susan Yelich-Benietsky, and on behalf of Davin Carr-Chellman and Stephen Schmidt, as well as the entire Commission for Professors of Adult Education Executive Committee, I would like to welcome you to this session, Proposal to Publication. The idea for this and subsequent programming is grounded in mission of service to our AAACE colleagues and beyond. We're still in the midst of some chaotic events, and it is important to support each other through our craft and regroup on ways that we can achieve our individual goals, collaborate with each other, and impact the field in positive ways. So we're going to divide this session in roughly 2 sections. Presentation, which we'll go through, Davin, Steve, and I at the first half, and then we'll have a discussion in which you can actively participate or just sit in. So at this point, I will share my screen. So I went over a bit of this and also wanted to encourage each of you to check out our Commission for Professors of Adult Education for, further continuing professional education opportunities. So
will this PowerPoint be available to us afterwards?
Correct. I believe, Terry, you are recording the session, correct?
That is correct. And I will ask everyone to please keep your mics on mute, and you can put your questions in the chat box.
That if anybody has questions while we're talking, you can save them till the end of our talk, or you can just put them in the chat box because we're watching that as well.
Right, absolutely. So feel free to use both of those ways of checking in. I know that for some of us, at least for me, sometimes it's not always easy to put my audio on with everything that's happening working from home right now. So feel free to just use the chat as well. So the overview of our presentation, we'll be going over the conference proposal and presentation phase, again, encouraging everyone to engage in the AAACE conference that we have this year, but the information that we're presenting could also be relevant to other things that you're working on. Turning a presentation into a publication, we're looking at publications in a very diverse ways. Types of publications, finding the right publication, constructing a manuscript, we'll use that as an example of a publication, submitting your work, and then again, we'll have a discussion. So Steve?
Okay, I'm Steve Schmidt, and I'm a professor of adult education at East Carolina University, and I'll be talking a little bit about the conference proposal process, or the conference proposal phase of this whole process. So when we look at our research ideas and when we look at things we're working on, the conference proposal is a good way to start out the whole process, because as you'll see in the subsequent slides that come up here, it's a good way to present your ideas, present your research, regardless of where you are in the process. You might present an entire research project. You might present part of it that you've done so far, because maybe you're looking for how do you proceed with next steps. So it's a good place to start, and it's also a good place to gather feedback and gather ideas. And you'll hear that idea pretty consistently as we go through our presentation here today. So why present at a conference? Again, it's kind of the starting point of a pipeline to a research article, or to any kind of article, actually, for that matter. And it's a good way to get feedback, to share your ideas, and also to connect with others who might have similar ideas. We as researchers, we're encouraged to do work on our own research agendas, but we're also encouraged to work with colleagues and develop partnerships and things like that. So at these conferences, you may meet people with similar ideas. You might meet people who can help you with yours, and vice versa when you present at the conference. So I'll talk a little bit about developing an effective proposal, and also a little bit about how proposals are assessed. So when we look at proposals for the AACE conference in particular, there are instructions on the AACE website for you to to check out, and you can start a proposal right there from the ACE website. And just a couple of tips and tricks and things like that that might help you out when you're developing a proposal. First of all, as I mentioned before, you can develop a proposal at any stage in your research process. So don't feel like you have to wait till your research is finished before you develop and submit a proposal. Even if you just have a literature review on something that you want to present, that's fine. If you have a work in progress, that's great too. There are all kinds of different ways to present your research and all kinds of different reasons why you might want to present it at different stages. So don't wait till the very end, because you can be presenting all along. When you start a proposal, and I'll say this off the bat because this is one of the first things that you'll have to address when you start a proposal, is that every year the conference has a theme associated with it, the ACE conference. But when you're developing your proposal, if you can match your idea for the proposal to the conference theme, that's great. But the first thing I would say is don't feel you have to, and don't feel that you can't submit a proposal just because it's not in line with the conference theme, because we get all different kinds of proposals, and so don't let that stop you. A couple different proposal types. Concurrent sessions, those are the ones where you present your work in front of people, like in a classroom style environment. Roundtables, if you are interested in talking about your topic in more detail, maybe you propose a roundtable, because a roundtable is just a group of people who get together and talk about a particular topic or idea. And those who facilitate roundtables they're charged with pulling together basic information about the idea to generate to get the conversation going. So you have to kind of set the stage, but it's more of a back and forth discussion. And then posters are another good way to present your ideas. We have a poster presentation session. It's 60 or 90 minutes, and you will develop a poster, and people will come by and ask you about your ideas and about your poster, things like that, in kind of a free flow kind of way. Some of the things I would say when you're developing a proposal is make sure you recover all required elements, and make sure that when you're putting in all the requirements, things like the keywords, an abstract, who your target audience is, you're very specific in what you do. The more specific you can be in terms of what your proposal is about and who it's aimed at, the better. When we look at reviewing proposals, we really want to learn about why this topic is important. So I would say when you develop your proposal, and when you put in the session description, and when you put in the abstract, focus on why this topic is important, why you think others may be interested in the topic. Okay, and there are all different kinds of formats. As I mentioned before, concurrent sessions, roundtables, and posters. Pick the one that you think is the best, but in some cases, the people who review the proposal will maybe think that your topic goes better in another format. And so don't be alarmed, or don't feel like that you did something wrong if you're asked to present it in another format, because that happens all the time. So it's just a matter of how the reviewers think you could best present your work. So those are the types of things that we look at when we're looking at proposals. One other thing I'll note before we go to the next slide is that spelling and grammar are important. So be sure that everything is spelled correctly, and be sure that correct grammar is used. That is often the thing that will sink a proposal, because we review proposals and we think, if the person submitting the proposal, if they can't be bothered to put in the correct grammar and use correct spellings and things like that, that kind of is a reflection of why is this topic important if they don't think it's important enough to do it correctly. So that's the final note I'll say about proposals and how they're assessed.
Steve, can I interject real quickly here?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So this is an important part of the process to think about audience. So when you're doing research, it's a rhetorical exercise. So thinking about we're all interested in adult education, continuing education. So AAACE is an audience that we're interested in. and our research connects with. But, you know, when you're thinking about building a research agenda, you know, think about, you know, who are the people that you want to speak to with your research. And there are other associations, there are other journals out there to look at that, you know. So when you are reading a research article and you come across scholars again and again, you know, that's an important message to you about who your audience is, right? So, you know, you see names pop up over again and again, you see different topics pop up again and again. Again, that's how you get a sense of who are the folks who are going to want to hear what it is you're talking about. So that's also something that's important to consider.
Great. Thank you, Devin. Okay, well, we talked a bit about developing an effective proposal and the assessment process. So I'll talk a little bit in this slide about guidelines and tips for presentations and then after the presentation, because that's equally as important as the beforehand process. So when we look at presenting your work, as I mentioned before, don't be surprised if you present or you propose one format and you're asked to present in a different kind of format. That it's pretty typical. And again, we're out to determine what's the best way to present the information as you've told us what it's going to be in the proposal. So when you when we look at like presentation and guidelines and tips and things like that, first of all, regardless of the type of presentation, it's good to allow for some sort of interaction, especially with roundtables, of course, because that's really what they're really focused on interaction. But be sure that if you are asked to present in a concurrent session, you have something for the audience to do, maybe some type of activity, maybe some type of discussion, questions, as well as present your work. Most of the sessions at ACE, I would say, are interactive in some way or another. The degree to which they are interactive, though, kind of depends on the format type. Also, when you present, have something, whether it's slides or a handout or an activity, things like that, maybe have something to give to the presenters or give to the audience. Again, whether it's a handout or something for them to do, the more interactive, I think, the better. One thing I'll note about presentations, and we on the board of ACE have discussed this, it continues to be an issue, and it's something that I think is important to note, is that when at the ACE conference, there are a lot of concurrent sessions and a lot of roundtables at one time. So often in concurrent sessions and even often in roundtables, we get lower numbers of attendees in the sessions. Sometimes there are 3, 4, or 5 people who are attending your presentation. That doesn't mean the topic is not important or that people aren't interested in your work. Really, we kind of struggle with we want to have a lot of different presentations going on at once because the field of adult ed is very broad, and there are a lot of different topics that we bring into the conference. But that often means, the trade-off for having a lot of different topics presented at once is that often the numbers of people attending each session are lower. So again, don't feel bad if your numbers are low when you present in your topic, because that's again pretty typical for the conference. When you present, allow plenty of time for questions and answers. The nicer thing about having lower numbers at presentations is that you can make it more of a conversation, and you can get people involved, and you can make it less formal and more give and take, back and forth kind of thing. So that's a good thing associated with having smaller numbers of attendees. After the presentation, again, because the presentation is a really good spot to get feedback and get input on your work. After the presentation, make those connections, get contact information from the people who attended. Maybe if somebody is interested in the same topic, that's the time after the presentation to make that connection and maybe start a relationship where you could work together on things in the future. So doing the networking, gathering contacts for the future and stuff like that, all that should happen after the presentation, as well as making notes about the feedback you get during the presentation. I always do that right after the presentation, otherwise I forget sometimes when people give me good information that I may want to use going forward.
All right, so moving from, you've done a presentation and thinking a little bit about collecting your thoughts after the presentation. So really starting to focus in on once you've presented and you want to move that into other scholarly venues, right? To broaden your audience from the folks you talked to at the conference to folks in other venues. So this slide is figuratively and literally empty, right? So in my experience, this is the place where people lose momentum. You make a great presentation, you feel good about it. You know, you've had your, well, I said to Steve and Susan earlier today that I think we've got 42 people here in this presentation, and that quadruples the cumulative number of folks who have watched me present in my academic career over the years. So, so you know, you've had 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people watch you present, so you should celebrate, right? So Ernest Boyer talked about, you know, our scholarly community should be a celebratory community. So celebrate, enjoy the fact that you got accepted to a conference. People were interested in your topic, interested enough to say, join our community, talk to folks here about it, and let's see what happens. So don't lose momentum, right? So Steve talked about finishing your presentation. You got feedback before you presented, right? So at the AAACE conference, for example, and other adult ed conferences, it's pretty common for reviewers to give you bits of feedback on your proposal. So you've got some of that feedback, but you got feedback as well from folks who were attending, whether they actually talked to you or whether it's just nonverbal cues that you're getting as you're presenting. Those are all things to pay close attention to because they give you a good indication of what's connecting and what isn't. So make sure you take time at this point in the process, because this is where folks get bogged down. Because this is, you know, much like a dissertation process. Whenever you finish your coursework and you launch off into dissertating, things tend to get bogged down because the chains are off. You know, you don't have coursework to kind of guide you anymore. You don't have the conference, the presentation, the folks you're going to talk to, that pressure to guide you. So, you know, you can just kind of let it float off and not really take it where it can go. So take that feedback, get concrete with it. So, and in particular, something that I do. I take my PowerPoint slide or whatever I've done, my speaking outline, and I try to translate that into a manuscript right away. Because for me, for my scholarship objectives, it's the research manuscript that matters the most to me. We'll talk through later on here a bunch of other different venues for your scholarship, but for me right now, at this point in my career, I want a research manuscript. So I've got a template ready to go. So I take my PowerPoint slides and I try to write my PowerPoint slides in a way that lends itself after the fact to just getting plugged right in to a manuscript. So I don't have to lose steam. I can just take my PowerPoint slide titles and make them my level 1 headings in my research manuscript and start typing stuff in there. And you know how you work, you know what your writing style is or you know what your working style is. For me, what works is to just write, just start writing, sit down for an hour and just start putting pen to paper and get stuff down there and parse it out later, right? Edit later, make things look nice and pretty later on. Because for me, it's the stopping that makes it really hard to get going again. So this empty slide, don't let that be what happens to your presentation after the AAACE conference, okay? Don't go out into the emptiness, fill something in there, okay? Start putting pen to paper, words into your computer, and make it as easy on yourself as you can. You know, I really believe in making our work as enjoyable and productive as we can be. So make it as easy on yourself as you can. You know, over time, you know, you'll edit, you'll refine it, and you'll make it better. So I think that's probably the good place to move on to the next slide, although there was a question here. Yes. So someone asked if I'd be willing to share my template or outline. Of course, yeah, anybody who's interested in that, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to share whatever I've got. So let's talk a little bit about types of publications. So you're taking the ideas you've worked hard to refine into a well-organized and well-received presentation. So what happens now? What are the concrete outlets and options that you have for yourself. So one, a lot of conferences offer proceedings. Proceedings basically are a manuscript version that accompanies your presentation. So AAACE just started doing proceedings as an option for presentations at their conference, and AERC, the Adult Education Research Conference, has always done that. So at AERC, in order to go on and actually present at the conference, you have to finish a 3,000 word proceedings manuscript that accompanies that before you can actually go and present at the conference. At AAACE this past year, that proceedings manuscript, which I think was also 2,000 to 3,000 words, that was after the fact, right? So you didn't have to do it in order to present. So different conferences handle this different ways. Not every conference or academic association has a proceedings. There are good things and there are bad things about it. So it's extra work, for example, right? So it isn't just go and present and get that presentation that you can then put on your CV or your resume. But when there's a proceedings involved, it's automatically 2 lines that you've got a presentation as well as a manuscript that you've published and has been peer reviewed. And then additionally, if you're wanting to turn that into an original manuscript to go to a journal, an academic journal, usually those are 6,000 to 8,000 words long. So with the proceedings, you're halfway there. So, it's just a great way to think in your mind, what is the pipeline for my research? How do I move from conceptualization in my doctoral seminar or whatever is going on and turn that to a presentation into a proceedings manuscript into a 7,000 or 8,000 word original research manuscript, right? So that there's a great flow that can happen there if you're kind of on top of it and being strategic about it. So when we talk about academic journals and scholarly journals, again, the palette of these, the diaspora of scholarly journals is huge and incredibly diverse. And given the diversity of the field of adult education, our research can connect with so many different kinds of journals. So it often really pays dividends to be very thoughtful and intentional about choosing the journal, the outlet that you want to submit to. And now this is talking about original research, a manuscript, usually 6,000 to 8,000 words long, blind peer reviewed. And what blind peer reviewed means is that you as the author submit to a journal. The journal sends it out to reviewers, usually at least 2, sometimes 4, depending on which journal it is. They don't know who wrote it. The reviewers don't know who wrote it. And likewise, the person who wrote it, they don't know who the reviewers are. So it's double blind, right? And the only person who actually has sight, right, who knows who anybody is in that process is the editor of the journal. So that's the bulwark of the scholarly process, of the rigor of the scholarly process. That's what holds it all together, that blind peer review. But there are other options, right? Many scholarly journals have other options for publishing. So for the AAACE journals, you've got Adult Learning, you've got Journal of Transformative Education, and Adult Education Quarterly. I believe both JTED and Adult Learning, I know Adult Learning because I work closely with that. We have sections in there that are editorial review, not blind peer reviewed. So we've got a reflections section where you can offer sort of well-formulated reflections on the field and your practice in the field. Every journal offers book reviews or resource reviews. So these are great ways to start moving into publishing, and maybe ways that you can relate your presentation also to something that journal might be interested in. So other types, I want to be careful of the time here as well. So theory to practice is a really great approach to thinking about journals. So if you've written something theoretical or you've got ideas theoretically, how does that relate to practitioners? Adult education being having practitioners and their interests and their work really deep at our core. And then we've talked about the original research article. Podcasts are a flourishing endeavor. We've got several folks who are active in our association here who do some podcasts, and blogs as well. Blogs are popping up. So these are outlets that maybe are not blind peer reviewed and don't have that level of rigor that works for someone who's, say, trying to get tenure. But in terms of getting an audience for your ideas, oftentimes podcasts and blogs can have a larger audience than what a scholarly journal might have. And Steve and Susan, any maybe white papers and newspapers, your experiences with those kinds of outlets?
Yeah, I've written a few white papers, and usually when you write when I've written white papers, it's been because somebody's asked me to do it. So some of these things, you can just submit, like you can submit an article to a journal or something like that. But a white paper is more of a standalone paper. Usually that requires somebody to ask you to do something like that. It's there's not really a spot where you can submit white papers for publication. And newspapers, trade journals, I can talk a little bit about those because things that are more practitioner or more consumer based, like papers and journals, things like that. Whenever you do a research study, whenever you write something, I always tell my students to make sure that you get as much use out of it as you can. So if you are writing a journal article for publication in Adult Education Quarterly, for example, you might also use that same topic, writing it differently for a different audience, and submit it to a trade journal or a newspaper if it's a consumer kind of thing. So again, that there's a big variety of types of publications, and your research article doesn't just have to go one place. You can use the topic in multiple spots to hit multiple audiences. And one other thing I'll mention about books, because a book is certainly an option too. You can write a book yourself based on your research. You can ask people to write chapters, and you can be the book editor. One of the new things that either Susan, you could talk about maybe, or Terry, if you know more about it, is the AAACE now has a book series. I believe it's a deal with Routledge where they're publishing books. So that's a possible option too, as terms of an outlet for your work. And then there's the New Direction series as well.
The contract Routledge was just signed. We don't have any books yet, but they are a new publisher that AACE is just contracted with.
So look out for those requests for proposals. That's a very different. You'll also see some special editions even that journals have, or New Directions will have a focus area. That may be something. One of our colleagues just, Jelina's here, who edited a New Direction series on mentoring. I submitted something about military affiliated learners. So, look also for those requests for proposals that have something that focuses on your area of research, or that can take you onto a related line of inquiry with your area of research. So look for those requests for proposals that will be coming out.
Could I add one more thing?
Yes.
Could you go back to the publication slide?
Yes.
So really quick, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jelina Alston. Two things I want to mention that I've seen lately, whether it's through my own work, especially if it's affiliated with a specific type of funding, or for my clients who I serve as a project evaluator. So digital toolkits are very popular right now, in any type of digital or digitized reports, something where people can really get a good overview of your research and the findings and highlight key points within the findings. But also infographics, right? Because a lot of a critique that many people have when it comes to us in the ivory tower per se is that we don't always know how to appropriately translate our work to practitioners. And so some people encourage to, as a complement to your academic publications, your journals, your books, et cetera, but to also consider providing infographics. And it could be something as simple as a, one-page infographic where you use like Canva and some of the Adobe Acrobat or the Creative Cloud technologies. But don't be afraid to tap into the digital world. Also, I know this sounds, interesting, and this is not publications, and I'm sure they're going to talk about this, using social media to increase your readership and publications. So I'm gonna be quiet because I don't want to jump the gun, but yeah.
Thank you, Jelena. But I look forward to your contributions to the next slide because I think you have some important things to add. So building on what Jelena just talked about, finding the right publication, and publication doesn't always mean a manuscript. So you have this, whether it's research you're doing, or maybe it's a theoretical piece, maybe it's a practitioner piece, because it's not always linear. You may start with the practitioner piece about how to do something and then develop a research project from it, or you may have a research project and then, you present on it, but then you publish something else about the methodology, right? How to work the methodology or something, but really figuring out where the pieces should go and what is the point of what you're trying to accomplish. And when I say, what is your authentic work as a practitioner scholar, this is not talking about authentic about, of course you can't self-plagiarize yourself, and we're gonna, get to that in a minute. You can't reproduce the same piece you've done in multiple areas and it's the same work, right? But you can slice and dice your work to fit different kind of venues and different audiences. And I think asking the question, I'm a member of different heritage communities. So sometimes when I think about who will benefit and who should benefit, I may take something published in Adult Education Quarterly, which is important to my field. It's also important to my institution. It's a highly ranked journal in our field, but the first piece I may publish may be in a different language from that. And it may be just a section. Maybe it's an interview with one person. And I'm going to give that back to the community in the language in which that community speaks. And so thinking about that and thinking about communicating the value of all of the different kinds of publications that are out there, whether it's a podcast. Jelena had interviewed me for a podcast for AEQ a while ago, but also thinking about how you will balance the needs of the institution, right? Because you're employed by the institution or your company, or if we have people here from other areas, what do they want from your portfolio? What do you have? And then what is your authentic work as a practitioner scholar? So you can meet all those needs and also communicate the value of publishing manuscripts in areas or publishing the blogs to reach a different, to outreach for populations who need to benefit from your research or practitioner work. So really thinking about these kind of questions and strategically mapping how you're going to accomplish that, because this is our legacy as a scholar and making an imprint on the field in whatever areas you're thinking of. So think about that, and who is the audience? Who are the folks that you would like to reach and maybe expand the conversation with about in a particular area. So, after you present, these are all kinds of questions that you also can think about, in addition to the traditional kinds of manuscripts that are valued, that we all strive to publish, but also thinking about where those go. And again, who will benefit, who should benefit, what do you have in your portfolio, and how will you balance the needs of the institution and your authentic work as a practitioner scholar? So those are some things to continue to think about.
One thing I'll add is, actually that's coming up next, so I'll talk about here. Thank you, Susan. One of the things, and I'll talk about this because I see it as a reviewer, and I actually did it when I was in my the first publication I ever submitted was based on my dissertation research, and I can remember it. I wrote up the article, I sent it in. It got rejected for a lot of different reasons, and looking back at it, it was because I kind of summarized my whole dissertation in the article, and really I ended up getting I think 3 or 4 articles out of my dissertation. So I say that because when I read articles today for review, often I think there are probably 3 or 4 articles in this one article. And so be sure that when you write for publication like this in a scholarly journal, you're focused on, you're focused enough so you can present your idea within the word limit and have it be comprehensive and cohesive. And not as scattered as I was, that first time I submitted an article, to cover my whole dissertation work. So, it's okay to, to take the pieces of a dissertation or take the pieces of a research project and publish each of them individually, as well as maybe one overall overarching kind of piece. But make sure that you're focused. And so when you construct a manuscript, first of all, finding a home, what I recommend is that if you have some ideas before you even start writing, as we said before, every type of manuscript has different rules and guidelines and word counts and different foci, things like that. So find a home, find a spot where you want to publish. Go to that journal or go to that spot where these articles are published, read a few of them, look at the word count, look at the writing style, look at how references are presented, look at how they do tables, things like that. Find out the rules for that spot where you're intending to write, and then write the article, put it together based on what the rules are for that particular spot.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much, Steve. So thinking further about constructing a manuscript. So we've talked a little bit about how conference proceedings kind of gets you halfway to a full-length manuscript. And so the fourth bullet point there, again, proceedings, halfway to a full manuscript. So we know the full manuscript is a really, for many of us, is a really important outlet and a goal or objective when we've got ideas in a presentation, want to transform them into a scholarly product. But really, for any of these outlets that we're discussing, it's important to think about self-plagiarism, building on work. How do you build on your own work and other work in ways that are ethical and appropriate? So for a lot of folks, self-plagiarism seems a bit like a contradiction. How does that happen? So there's all sorts of reasons that over really 20 years ago, this was less on the radar, but there's all sorts of good reasons that this has now popped onto our radar in a much bigger way. So one, it exists, right? Self-plagiarism happens. So, and it often happens unintentionally. So you just want to be careful about how you are using your own work. So if you have published a proceedings at AAACE or at AAACE, you just need to make sure that you are, of course, not citing it, not using it just word for word without citing where it was before. And really, you're handling your own work much like you would handle anyone else's work at that point. So you think about work that you have written and published previously as, all of a sudden that's like a different person and they've published something and you're going to cite them or refer to their work, right? So it's this weird sort of dual existence that you have once you've published something, that you've got to treat yourself as another author. And I think that's kind of, I think the heart of that matter in terms of self-plagiarism. But I'd be interested if other folks have anything to add about that's important to mention in terms of self-plagiarism.
I don't think so. I think you summed it up, Davin. You do need to build, on your work, your line of inquiry, and acknowledge previous work. And what I've seen people do and what I've done is to acknowledge at the end of if I've published a manuscript, acknowledge at the end where it was first presented. So that, that goes into the actual journal publication then, that this work was, pieces of this work were first presented at AAACE or AERC or whatever the case may be.
Great, thanks so much, Susan. So go down to these last 2 bullet points here, and this really follows up on what Steve was talking about in terms of his dissertation and thinking about, okay, so in this one manuscript, there are really 3 or 4 manuscripts. So what are strategies that you can apply to your writing to help you think that way, because it really is taking one way of looking at your research and you're shifting the direction at which you are looking at it. And all of a sudden new things open up. So one way to do that, thinking about different conceptual frameworks to ground your work. Maybe you approach your research and your analysis in a really linear, kind of modernist way, right? So you're thinking about it, okay, this makes sense, this follows from this certain theoretical lens that you're using on it. Well, maybe you think about it, then look at your data from a postmodern perspective, where you look at it with power relationships, right, become the lens through which you're looking at your data. All of a sudden, things look really, really different. And the world should hear that. You've got good ideas to share with the world, write it up. So that different lens that you can bring to your data can make a whole lot of difference. Analyzing different sections of the data. So a good example from my own experience. So I was involved in a large grant-driven data collection process around school improvement. And we had a whole lot of data. It was all qualitative data related to technology and rural schools. Okay, so that was one piece. That was a manuscript. But we had all sorts of other data that was important about administrative responsibilities in rural schools. So they worked together, right? Technology, administrative work, but they also needed to be their own manuscripts. They needed to be, right? That data cried out to have its own manuscript to talk about technology and rural schooling. So different sections, different things that come out of the data sometimes deserve to have their own manuscripts.
Sorry about that. Very briefly before we head into our discussion, so submitting your work, we touched upon some of these pieces, different, there's different interfaces for different submission processes. Some may only have an email that you send the work to, or a different submission site if it has to do with some video or audio recording you have, or Scholar One or whatever it is. So make sure that you have that submission process, you've researched that. Make sure that you understand perhaps there's different types of responses from editors. Not everybody responding in the same timeline right now. You may want to investigate that ahead of time. Say, what is the usual turnaround time, so you're not emailing that editor every week or something like that, and understand what the process is. Getting a revise and resubmit is a really good thing. I don't know anybody actually who's gotten accepted on the first time. There's always things they want you to be able to revise through the process, particularly if it's blind peer reviewed. And then handling rejection, let it sit, let it marinate a little bit, and then, dust off those comments and look at, hey, how can I incorporate this feedback into a different publication, and what might I use? Or is there something that this just wasn't a fit? I did my homework, and you know what, the adult ed piece didn't connect here for this journal, and it wasn't within scope. The reviewers didn't quite get it. How can I use this feedback and polish it up again, revise it, and send it to someplace else where it might be a better fit and a better home. So those are some things to think about. We all get rejected. So for our discussion, go ahead, Steve.
One other thing I'll say about that is what a thing not to do at that point, if you get a rejection, is don't just let the manuscript go. I mean, don't just forget about it. When I get a rejection, and we all have gotten far more rejections than we get acceptances in the grand scheme of things. But when I get a rejection, I take a day or so to be irritated, and then I go back in, I look at the comments, I look at how can I maybe improve it and resubmit it, or else where might I send it to, what other place might I send it. But I always tell the students and faculty that I work with, there's a home for every manuscript. It's just a matter of finding the right one. So if you get rejected, work on either revising it, find another place for it, but don't just let it go, because you put a lot of time into it by that point.
Right, absolutely.
Susan, I had to walk away for a second, so I don't know if you talked about this already, but I just wanted to make mention. I think sometimes when we, do get those rejections or we're feeling like the pressure of a timeline to get something published, I know there's a lot of journals out there or publication venues that are, I don't know what you call it, but they kind of I've lost the word. They charge you a lot of money.
Predatory?
Thank you. I just couldn't figure it. I just lost the word.
Yeah, it's
There's a
predatory.
lot of those
Yeah.
out there, and they charge you a lot of money, and they publish it right away, and I just want to caution people of that. I mean, I would suggest that if you're looking at a particular journal, like talk to your colleagues. Do you know anything about this journal? Have you ever published there? What's its reputation? Sometimes that's hard information to find.
Really great point. Because after you publish in a conference proceeding, you will no doubt get lots of emails or from a conference saying, hey, we've read this publication. You did this great work, come publish with us. Really follow, if you are unfamiliar with it, do your homework and also talk to different colleagues to see if they've heard of the publication, do some research on it to see, because yes, then they can charge you an exorbitant amount of money. So it's essentially, these are predatory journals. K-State, I serve as an associate professor at Kansas State University, and I think someone had developed like a list actually of all of these predatory journals, because they only have to change a word in the title of a journal to make it sound like it, because right, it sounds adult ed, it sounds education research or something, and you think, oh, well, this looks legitimate. But there are, other things you need to, that's a great point, Rachel. Great point.
Could I add something to that really quick though?
Sure.
Because this is something that I've learned. So we all know that within our field, sometimes it may be a challenge to identify funding, right? So if you are engaging in projects where you're connecting with people on the STEM side, oftentimes they do pay for their publications because they don't have a AAACE to support their publications through their membership. So, when you think about publications now moving forward, if you're partnering with any of those colleagues in different fields, make sure that you budget include a line within your budget for your grants for publications. So those are different than the predatory journals that Susan's and Rachel are talking about, right? But there are some, so for example, if we didn't have AAACE and if we didn't pay as members to support the journals, then they would have to charge you to publish, right? And so you should be able to know the difference, because the predatory ones are, like Rachel said, astronomically expensive, where the STEM-based journals are pretty reasonable, and oftentimes the researchers just know to budget it in within their grant funding. So just something to think about.
That's a really great point. And there is a push for open access. So something bad just happened to my screen. Anyways, there is a push for open access, and those open access journals many are legitimate and do charge a fee. And sometimes libraries at institutions will also have some small grants to cover that fee.
So Annalisa Raymer asked if, in the chat, do you have to wait until you hear back from one journal before sending a piece to another? And the answer there is almost universally, yes. I haven't experienced one that doesn't. So yes, it does really pay off to be careful, right? To pay attention to the timeline. In my experience, by the time you go through a revision or two with a journal, from the time you submit to a journal until it's actually published, it's 18 to 24 months before it's actually in print. So you need to kind of work that into your calendar. And if you are if you're in a situation where you need some things to happen more quickly, then you want to think about some different outlets, right? So you think about not just original research articles, but other venues where your research may reach an audience that would be relevant for your CV. But yes, it does almost always pay off to find out, is it published quarterly? Is it published 2 times a year, 1 time a year? What kind of submissions are they looking for? A lot of journals only do thematic. So they've got a theme for an issue and you've got to fit within that theme. So you just want to be careful. It almost always pays off to know who the editors are and who's on the editorial board. That gives you an indication of things the journal might be interested in publishing. Really, anything you can learn about a journal is helpful in figuring out if it's a good audience for your work.
I do have a question. Are we in the discussion section right now?
No,
Yes.
Right ahead.
Corinne, you're
Yes.
totally out of bounds, Corinne. You're totally out of bounds here.
All right, I'm
Yeah,
Corinne
we're-
and I'm from the University of Dayton. So I just saw Dr. Carr-Chellman a few hours ago for a meeting, but I do have a couple. It says questions and challenges and what has worked. So I have one of each. What has worked is when you get a rejection, eat chocolate. That's always working. Preferably good French one. Challenges, I think, and that's my question to you all, actually. I'm an assistant prof tenderline. I have submitted a manuscript. It was revised and resubmitted in May. I haven't heard. And I'm at the point where I'm emailing the editor every day, try to nudge nicely. But I do need to have an answer. So what do I do now? Since May, nothing. And one email said, oh, I'll get back to you by October 15, and we are the end of February. So I don't know.
That's a tough
would-
question because of COVID right now, right? And this is just from my experience as an editor. Sometimes it was challenging to find reviewers, so I can't imagine what editors are faced with right now, with COVID. That is an unusually long delay, but I can only guess that COVID has impacted that process in some way.
And I think, and I'll ask my colleagues just to confirm that, I think if you wanted, is the case with any journal, if you didn't receive a decision and you wanted to pull your manuscript back, maybe and send it somewhere else, I think you just need to notify them formally that you're taking your manuscript out of consideration. I don't know if you want to do that, but I think, if you submit something and never hear, I think you can formally do that. Is that correct, Devin and Jelena? I know you're editors, so we'll ask you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Corinne, Dr. Brion. So in your particular situation, because I'm very familiar with it, if the editor is responding to your emails, then potentially you leave it with them, maybe, but that many months. And if you're only getting spotty responses from the editor, personally, what I would do is I would pull it. Now you've sacrificed all that time, and it's heartbreaking because that's your baby right there with that journal for their safekeeping. But if the journal editor isn't even responding to your emails in a timely fashion, I would just pull it and find a different outlet. That's what I would do. But I have tended to cut bait rather than continue fishing when I've had those situations in my own career. I think other folks probably handle it differently.